Have with me today Dr. J. Smith, and we're talking about Theophanies today, in the manifestation of the Messiah before Gospels say that the Messiah was born of Mary. Theophanies in the Bible and Theophanies in the Quran. So we just had a little bit of a chat, and we thought it might be nice to record this and put it up as a little discussion on the theology sort of side of things. So my question to Dr. J. Smith is, concerning the burning bush, I think that the burning bush and Jesus Christ as sort of theophanies are very comparable things. If we regard Jesus Christ as a theophany, then the same questions that we have about the burning bush can be asked about Jesus Christ. Was the burning bush, this is my question where it started, was the burning bush an appearance of God, part of God appearing like that, or was it God came down upon a created tree and a bush and appeared as a divine sort of fire which wasn't consuming the tree? Which one was it, and how does that relate to can this be used as an analogy for Jesus Christ? So could you elaborate on that?
And this is thanks a lot, Joe, and listen, it's good to unpack this and to look at both the Christian view on this and the Muslim view on this. The Christians have no difficulty because, listen, all the way through the Bible you have God coming down and entering time and space, comes down to earth. He does so at the very beginning there in the Garden of Eden. He's there in chapter 3 of Genesis, verse 7 and 8, walking and talking in the cool of the day. If you're walking, you better have a pair of legs. If you're talking, you better have a pair of lungs. So there you can see a human form, and he's calling out to Adam and Eve, where are you? So he wants to have a discussion. There is a relation. They're hiding behind the tree. Why are they hiding? Because they know he's there. So God is there in the Garden of Eden. He is there taking on human form. So that's the very beginning of time, or the very beginning of the human race, where we see God doing that. You see him wrestling with Jacob in the Bible. If you're wrestling, you better have a pair of arms. You better have a pair of legs. Otherwise, how do you wrestle? And he chooses to let Jacob win. So a volition is there as well. As we go through, we see that the children of Israel led through the desert, and God comes down and appears to them as a pillar of cloud during the day and a pillar of fire during the night. So he can take on any form he wants. But let's go back to the burning bush, because this is something that both Islam and Christianity share together. It's in both scriptures. It's in the Old Testament, in Genesis 3, and it's also in the Quran in Surah 27. And this is why it's important that when you get into this kind of discussion, you go back to your scriptures. So I go back to the Bible and I show them in Genesis 3 that we have the story of the burning bush. And in the Quran, they have it in Surah 27, the very same, well, almost the very same story. And that's where you can use this as a bridge to introduce this whole concept of God entering time and space. Anathema to Muslims, not to me. I have no difficulty with God entering time and space, and neither do you, Joe, because this is something that you, as a Jewish background, you would have. You see right through your scriptures. Many, we call those theophanies that we're referring to. So let's open up.
Please introduce the verse to us, please. Yes.
So it's in chapter 27 of the Quran. And this is Moses, the story of Moses. And start with verse 7. So Moses, he says, I have seen a fire. I will bring you from there some information, or I will bring you a burning brand that you may warm yourself. So he's going to he sees this fire in the distance. He goes to see what this fire is. Verse 8. But when he came to it, he was called, blessed is whoever it is in the fire, and whosoever is round about it, and glorified is Allah, the Lord of Alameen. O Musa, verily, verse 9, it is I, Allah, the Almighty, and the all-wise. So hold on a minute, stop and think. And this is what I say to Muslims. There you have it in chapter 27. This voice within the fire is saying, this is Allah. But more than that, it is I, the Almighty, the all-wise. So this is God himself. Who else can call himself Allah, the Almighty, the all-wise? Let's go to chapter 20 and go to the very beginning of that chapter. In chapter 20, you will see the same story again. But it's fascinating. It goes even beyond that. So starting with verse 10, when he saw a fire, he said to his family, wait, verily, I have seen a fire. Perhaps I can bring you some burning brand therefrom. And he comes to the fire. When he came to it, verse 11, he was called by name. So not him. He's not speaking. There was another that was calling him from within the fire. O Musa, verily, verse 12, I am your Lord. Ooh,
Wow, wow. Yes, yes, that's right. From the
I am
fire.
your
Yeah,
God.
yeah, yeah.
Lord would be God. So take off your shoes. You are on a sacred valley. Now, and I say to my Muslim, this is very specific. He
Hmm.
is calling himself Lord, and he says, where I am is holy. Now, let me ask you, and I say this to Muslims, can there be any place on earth that is holy without God? No, by definition. If it's holy, that means God's there, right?
Presence
If
of
you have
God.
any doubt, continue on. And I have chosen you, verse 13. So listen to that which will be revealed. Now we come to verse 14. Verily, I am Allah, la ilaha illa ana. And
There is
and
no
he
God but
continues
me.
to say, so worship me and perform a salat for my remembrance. Now, who can ask for worship? Who can call himself God but God himself?
Right.
So I say to my Muslim friend, therefore, is God in that burning bush?
Has to
And
be.
what tends to happen, Joe, is they never really looked at these verses before. They've never had this question put to them, and you can see the gears turning in their head, and they realize they're in a dilemma here. Because if they say that can't be God, that can't be there, then they're going to have to tear those. They're going to have to tear that
Pages out.
story.
That's right.
20, chapter 27, they're going to have to tear it out of the Quran. They don't dare tear it out of the Quran because you know what happens when you do that. So they've got to then answer the second question. Well, then is that God? Keep that story there. So tell me, who can claim to be God? Who can claim to be their Lord? Who can claim to be worshipped? And who can claim that this is holy ground?
Right.
The answer is God. So is God in that bush in 1400 BC? And almost invariably, almost 90 to 95% of the time that I've gotten in discussion with Muslims, they have to admit, yes, that is God there.
Then why can't he be
Bingo.
present in Jesus then?
Therefore, if he can be there in 1400 BC, if God can enter time and space in 1400 BC and take on the form of a bush and even claim and demand worship and demand that he pray to him, the salat, only can you only do the salat to God. Then to me, that suggests that God is able to be there in 1400 BC. If he can be there in 1400 BC, then how is it they're having a problem with him coming 2,000 years ago and living for 33 years on earth? So that's a good way that you can take the Quran, you can take the Bible, which both agree on this story. And the reason why is because much of the Quran, anytime it talks about these biblical characters like Moses, they lift the story, take it out of the Quran and take it out of the Bible and put it into their Quran. And that's where I find are bridges that I can use to help them understand. Then we should be really agreeing with the same thing. We should have no difficulty with God taking on human form. So please, if you're going to argue, then argue with your own Quran. Don't argue with me.
Right. I have so going on from there. Then, so, okay. Obviously, we know that they say that the whole that somehow the Holy Spirit made it. Yeah, made. So how do they see that? Where does it? I mean, so I'll ask the question: Does the Y chromosome come? Is it Mary? Did Mary have a Y chromosome? So what's that called? The Klinefelter mosaic? Did she have this
Mary
genetic?
did not have a Y chromosome.
No.
So that had to be provided. For those who don't wear, in order to have a male, you have to have a Y chromosome and an X chromosome. If it's just a female, it's produced by by the women, just the X chromosome.
Right.
So in order for the male, there has to be a Y added to that. That's why you need the male sperm.
Right.
So if in that case, what you do, you go to chapter 19, verse 19. Let's start with that. The angel, this is Jibril, who we know as Gabriel, said, I am only a messenger from your Lord to give you a gift of a righteous son. A righteous son. Continue to verse 20. How can I have a son? She responds, that's Mary, when no man has touched me, nor am I unchaste. I am a virgin. So how can I have a son? So obviously this Y chromosome is coming to a virgin.
Actually, there is one verse which is about breathing into her sleeve, 2191.
Okay, and she who guarded her chastity, we breathed into her through our ru, and we made her and her son a sign. So it doesn't say sleeve here. It just says we breathed into her. Now you need to go to the hadith, and the word is fihi. Fihi means into her.
Into, yes.
So that means the ru Allah, which is the spirit of God, breathes into her. The traditions, the Islamic traditions, then say it was into her sleeve. Now, notice in my English translation, they put into her sleeve in parentheses because that's called tafsir. They're imposing the tafsir onto it because which is, those of you who aren't aware of how you read the Quran, be careful that you don't introduce that Yeah, there you go. So you see,
Yeah.
we blew into her. The garment is tafsir. That is not the Arabic. That is not in the Quran. Through our angel, and they're putting Gabriel in there. And we made her and her son a sign for the worlds. So there you can see the assumption is that the Ru'ala breathes into her the Y chromosome in order for her to have a son. That's as far as they will go. Muslims will not go any further than that. They will not say that Y chromosome is divine.
Well, you have to ask the question, where did the Y chromosome come from? I mean, it just appeared from nowhere. I suppose they're saying it's a brand new created Y chromosome, just brand new.
We would differ with them. We would say whether it's a Y chromosome that the Holy Spirit breathed in, it was God who was breathed in. So therefore, for us as Christians, we will believe that if God can take on any human form, if he can take on a form of a bush and be a total bush, or he can take on the form of a cloud of fire or a cloud of dust or cloud during the day, then certainly he can take on human form. Now, that's where we would be. That would be the only place where we would be different. And that's why you can then take these stories, and that's why you can get them into a discussion with Muslims from that point on.
Well, I have a kind of question. If it was a created Y chromosome, why didn't he just create it in her womb? Why does it have to be carried to her through the Holy Spirit? I mean, obviously, if it's being carried on the Holy Spirit, it must come from somewhere. I mean, what would be the point of creating it somewhere else and then carrying it on the Holy Spirit and then to put into her womb? Why not just create it in her womb? That's the kind of question which comes to my mind. I think the Arabic is up here.
The Quran is very clear. Actually, it's very clear. It's very close to the biblical concept, the New Testament concept, that God came and entered Mary via the power of the Holy Spirit. However it happened, it didn't happen coming up through her sleeve or through her arm. It just bleed into her.
Which is what the Quran says.
What they're doing here in the Quran is they're putting commentary, and that comes from the Hadith, which says that it came through her sleeve.
But then the idea that the Holy Spirit had to carry it into her is kind of negating the idea that it was a brand new creation. I mean, why not just create it inside her? So it has to have come from somewhere. That's kind of interesting.
Obviously, it came. God Himself entered time and space and then entered her womb.
Interesting, very interesting. It's contrary to the Jewish position on things. Jewish position would be simply that that God can do anything, so he doesn't have to take any flesh from her.
The whole other discussion is, why did he do that? And I would have to say that has to do with Genesis 3, when he turns towards Mary, when he turns to Eve and says, from your line, it has to be a woman's line, I'm going to come and destroy the head of Satan, and Satan's going to bruise your heel. So that's the fulfillment of that prophecy in Genesis 3:15. And then we need to go to Isaiah 7:14, where Isaiah says, for a young woman, well, anybody knows a young woman in Hebrew would be a virgin, woman who has not yet conceived, will bear a son, and he shall be called Emmanuel, God with us. So it's fulfilling that. It's not that it's fulfilling, it's coming along that whole line, fulfilling what God said at the very beginning to Eve. It had to come through Eve because Eve was the first to sin. So because of the fact that she was going to sin, she would help bring sin into the world. It will be through her lineage that she will also bring salvation to the world.
Right. Okay. So then the interesting thing is here whether God put something upon, say, Mary's egg, which became a human being. It's the same question as, did God put something upon a bush in front of Moses? And if they can accept that God put something of himself upon the bush in front of Moses, then why can't they accept that with regards to the egg in Mary's womb? The alternative is, I suppose, that the burning bush itself was not God put something on the burning bush, but the burning bush was actually a manifestation of God, an appearance of God, and then there was
something unique about that bush in that it never consumed itself, which suggests to me that there was no bush there to begin with, or that God took over that bush and His presence was such that He made that. We don't know. What I would say is that
we've got two options.
That's not outside the power of God either way.
Yeah. Either way, we've got two options, and those two options are also possible with regards to Mary, baby, or the embryonic Jesus in the womb of Mary. The two options seem to apply, and it's quite interesting that they can accept it with regards to the tree, but they can't accept it with regards to a human. That's kind of
that's where you have to get to, and that's why the discussions become fertile, and that's why in some ways I don't like to go to the Quran to get my proof text, because I don't think the Quran has the gospel at all. But I will go to the Quran when Muslims make claims that they cannot support. In this case, they cannot support that God cannot take on human form. In the same token, if he can take on the form of a bush, why can't he take on human form? That's contradictory.
Dr. J, thank you so much for explaining that. That's very helpful for us, and thank you for coming on and giving me a little bit of your time for this meeting. Thank you so much. I hope you'll come back again sometime.
All right. God bless you. Bye.